What is up, guys? Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be matchmaking the UFC lightweight division. So I'm going to be going over the top 15, the champion, and then a couple of fights outside of the rankings. Let's get started. Islammakhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan. So they fought before. This is actually going to be a rematch, right? They have a lot of history, but Islam does have to get through Dustin first. Islam is fighting Dustin at UFC 302, but I'm very confident that Islam will beat Dustin. I think he'll run through Dustin, and then I think later in the year he's gonna fight again. And who else can he realistically fight, right? If you're looking at Arman and Gamrot, those are the only people in the top 5 coming off of wins. Let's be real with ourselves for a second here. Come on, we all know Arman deserves it more than Gamrot. Listen, I'm not the biggest Arman fan, you know. Arman, I think that he should have took the fight in June. I think that him not taking that, I mean, it's a little bit of a duck. But later in the year, when Islam's looking for a fight, Arman just beat Charles Oliveira, which is a pound for pound win, right? Arman or Charles Oliveira is probably the best #1 contender in the sport right now, or not anymore, but he was the best #1 contender in the sport. And then Arman just ran through him. He beat him, or didn't run through him. It was a somewhat competitive fight, right? Arman beat him in a somewhat competitive fight. Didn't do it as good as Islam, but at the end of the day, he still beat Charles Oliveira. He earned his title shot. Later in the year, run it back. There's a good storyline, and we can see Islam beat his ass again. You know, it'll be a good fight. You know, maybe do it October, November, December. But moving on, Charles Oliveira versus Gamrot. So you got Charles Oliveira coming off the loss to Arman Tsarukyan. What do you do with him from there? I don't say you run it back. So let's look at the rankings, right? Below him, you got Gaethje. That's the person right below him. You don't run it back with Gaethje. I have a better option for Gaethje. Dustin Poirier. Same thing with him. After Dustin loses to Islam, I don't say you run it back. I have a better option for Dustin. Who's below Dustin? Gamrot, coming off a bunch of good wins, solid contender. Yeah, so I say you run this fight next. You know, it kind of reminds me of the Charles Oliveira versus Dariush fight. You know, you got Charles coming off a loss, looking to bounce back, and you got Gamrot, right? Kind of similar as Dariush, where he can beat Charles Oliveira and earn himself a title shot. And I think this fight makes a lot of sense right now. You know, I think it would be interesting to see their grappling exchanges. You know, and this is a winnable fight for both guys. For Charles Oliveira, if he beats Gamrot, it's a good fight to get him back on track, and I think that earns him a title shot. And then if Gamrot beats Charles, you know, that can really push him up the rankings, and I think he gets a title shot. So yeah, I think this is a fight that you make next for both guys. But moving down, Justin Gaethje versus Dustin Poirier 3. Now I know, obviously Dustin Poirier is a fight against Islam, as I said earlier, but I mean, come on, we all know that Islam's gonna win that fight. And then what do you do with Dustin after he loses? Dustin and Justin, they're probably both one fight away from retiring. You run the trilogy, right? It's 1-1. Both of them finished each other on the feet. So, you know, both of them, the two fights they've had were very entertaining, you know? The first fight was a war, and the second fight, even though it ended early, as long as it lasted, it was a great fight. And I think the third fight, it would be a banger, man. And Justin said, for my next fight, I want to leave it all out there. I want to go crazy. I think Justin wants to retire for his next fight. I think Dustin, after he loses to Islam, I think he's probably going to want to retire. So I say you make this fight next. Yeah, so I say you make this fight next. It makes a lot of sense, and it'll be a super entertaining fight. It makes sense for both guys, and we can see, you know, it's 1-1. So I want to see who wins. I want to see who wins in the trilogy. Entertaining fight, great retirement fight for both guys, and yeah. But moving down, Dariush versus Moicano. You know, you got Moicano. Man, he's really been pushing himself up the rankings. He beat Jalen Turner, Drew Dober, beat some other dude, but he's really starting to prove himself. And I say you throw him to one of the top guys of the division. And you got Dariush, right? I think he's ranked number 6 right now, but he's coming off some pretty bad losses, 2 first-round knockouts. So what do you do with him? I say this fight makes sense. You got 2 well-rounded guys. You got Moicano, who deserves to fight up the rankings. You got Dariush, who needs to take a little bit of step down, fight someone down the rankings, right? And you don't want to give Dariush a power puncher. Like, let's say you don't want to give Dariush Fiziev a fight where he could get knocked out in the first round again, right? Let's give Dariush a fight where somebody who isn't super dangerous on the feet, but there's still a tough test, and you know, it'd still be a very skillful fight, entertaining fight. And I think Moicano deserves it, man. I think if Moicano wins this, he can solidify himself as a top contender. But if Dariush wins, man, he isn't that far from a title shot. You know, he's probably 2 more wins away from a title shot, depending on who they're against. Maybe 3 more wins. But moving down, Michael Chandler versus Conor McGregor, right? The winner of that versus Max Holloway. So this is if Max Holloway stays at lightweight, right? I think Max Holloway probably should fight at featherweight. And wait, first thing, right? Why is Max Holloway only ranked number 9? He literally knocked out Justin Gaethje and dominated him for 5 rounds. So why is he only ranked number 9? You know, if you beat somebody, like when was the last time somebody beat somebody and was below them in the rankings after they beat them? Just doesn't make sense. I mean, I don't know. I just don't understand it. But that's what they did, right? But so for Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler. So with Conor McGregor, if he beats Chandler, right? Imagine Conor McGregor knocks out Chandler, right? There's gonna be so much hype around him. Everyone's gonna be Conor McGregor's back, right? You got Max Holloway with the momentum he has right now, the BMF belt. You run Max Holloway, Conor McGregor 2, the rematch for the BMF belt. That honestly might sell 2 million pay-per-views, man. And then if Chandler wins, right? If Holloway's gonna stay at lightweight, that fight still makes sense, you know. It's a tough challenge with Chandler's wrestling. Chandler will have a ton of momentum coming off the win over Conor McGregor. He'll probably be a big star now if he beats Conor McGregor. And then you run that fight next, Max Holloway, Conor McGregor, or Max Holloway, Michael Chandler for the BMF belt. Either way, you know, you got two people, Michael Chandler and Conor McGregor, that deserve to fight for the BMF belt. The winner of it could make a huge fight with Max Holloway, you know. So do Max Holloway versus the winner of Conor McGregor versus Chandler if Max Holloway wants to stay. But I think if I were Max Holloway, I would move down and fight Ilya because he has a very good chance in that fight. But moving down, Fiziev versus Dan Hooker. So you got Fiziev, who's coming off of two pretty, or they're not bad losses, honestly. He had a close fight with Justin Gaethje, then he fought Gamrot and got injured, and yeah, he technically lost. But we don't know how that fight would have went, you know. Gamrot was doing a little bit better than people expected on the feet for as long as that fight was going, but we don't know how it would have meant, man. Maybe Fiziev would have started turning it up, maybe Fiziev could have knocked him out, but we don't know. That's the thing, right? So with Dan Hooker, we know what happened in his fight against Jalen Turner. He beat him up, or he did beat him up in later rounds. He beat him up pretty bad in later rounds, but he got beat up a little bit too. But he showcased his chin, man. He hit a clean head kick. You know, that fight was a fucking war, and I think the Fiziev fight might honestly be able to top that. You know, I think they're both gonna bring it. They're both gonna look for the finish, and you know, Dan Hooker has a crazy chin right now. You know, in his last fight. You know, the weird thing about Dan Hooker is sometimes his chin will be shit, and sometimes it'll be good. But I think right now he's got a little bit of momentum. You know, that Jalen Turner win was impressive. He's coming off of 2 wins. Fizie's coming off of 2 losses. Rankings wise, it makes sense, and it would be a super entertaining fight, be a banger fight. Run it next. But next fight, Jalen Turner versus Benoit Saint Denis. So two guys that had a lot of hype around them. You know, Jalen Turner after his win over Bobby Green, he had a ton of hype around him, right? He got humbled a little bit by Marcano. I mean, I didn't expect Marcano to win that. You know, Jalen Turner did drop him. He probably could have finished him, but he walked away. You know, he thought it was a walk-off KO, but Moicano got back up, and then he TKO'd him in the second round on the ground, right? Benoit Saint Denis, right? He fought Dustin Poirier. He was doing okay in that first round. He was getting a couple takedowns, but Dustin Poirier clipped him. You got two guys who had a lot of hype around them, both coming off of losses. You know, Jalen Turner, he's actually he's lost a fair bit. He lost to Gamrot. He lost to Dan Hooker. He just lost to Moicano, and he's lost a lot of times like before he had a hype around him, right? So Jalen Turner, he's lost before. He can come back from this. If he beats Benoit Saint Denis, that's gonna be big for him, and that's probably gonna push him. You know, that's gonna push him back to being having a lot of hype around him. You know, if he gets a crazy knockout of Benoit Saint Denis like he did with Bobby Green, that could push him. But if Benoit Saint Denis beats Jalen Turner, you know that could push him up too. So you know, right now, I think this fight makes a lot of sense, and I think it'll be an entertaining fight too. So, moving down, for RDA, what do you do with him next, right? I just booked everybody above him, so they're out of the picture. So with RDA, you look below him, Bobby Green. I wouldn't mind that fight, but I have a better fight for Bobby Green. Who's outside the rankings? Who deserves a ranked fight outside the rankings the most right now? Grant Dawson, I would say, if he wins his fight at UFC 302, I would say he deserves it the most. He was ranked number 10. He got knocked out by someone unranked. Fair play, I guess you take him outside of the rankings. But once he's outside the rankings, I say he's like if there was a number 16, it would probably be Grant Dawson, and he has a fight coming up. He wins that. You book him against RDA. You know, a good test for RDA. It's a winnable fight too. You know, RDA could catch him. RDA has decent striking, so it's a winnable fight for both guys. A chance for Grant Dawson to bring himself to where he was before he got knocked out, and a chance for RDA to prove that he still has it. So yeah, I say you run this fight next. If Grant Dawson wins, and then if Grant Dawson loses, and I guess the guy that beat Grant Dawson, the fucking NPC. I don't really know much about him, but yeah, I say this fight makes sense next. All right, Bobby Green versus Paddy Pimblett. Now, I don't think Paddy Pimblett should fight Moicano. You know, I think we all know Moicano would destroy him, and I think we should put Moicano against someone at the top of the division. You know, so what do we do with Paddy Pimblett? You give him a ranked opponent, And I say Bobby Green makes the most sense, man. Bobby Green had a great call out of him. Bobby Green had a banger fight in his last, his last fight. Great performance against Jim Miller, and he's a good test for Paddy Pimblett. If Paddy Pimblett can beat Bobby Green, he really solidifies. He's a guy in that division. He's a problem because Bobby Green, he's no joke. And I think Bobby Green honestly ends up winning this fight. I think Bobby Green can defend the takedowns, and I think on the feet, Bobby Green destroys Paddy Pimblett. But Paddy Pimblett has a chance to prove himself as a guy in the division. And then if Paddy Pimblett wins this, if Moicano wins their fight, you run that fight, right? So I think it sets up Paddy Pimblett for a lot of good opportunities in this division. But if Bobby Green wins, then he just derailed the hype train. So yeah, I say you run this fight next. Solid fight, good fight. But moving down, first completely unranked fight. Diego Ferreira versus, I'm gonna be real. I'm not even gonna try and remember this guy's name, but he's a dude at the top of the unranked lightweights. The dude that Diego Ferreira's fighting. He's one of the best unranked lightweights. Same thing with Matt Frevola. Diego Ferreira. He just knocked out Michael Johnson, coming off a crazy knockout over Michael Johnson. He was actually just in the rankings, but they took him out. So you do the winner of Diego Ferreira versus this guy. I'm just gonna call him this guy. No disrespect to him. Versus Matt Frevola. Matt Frevola, I hope it's Diego Ferreira, because I don't know much about the guy Diego Ferreira is fighting. But if Matt Frevola versus Diego Ferreira happens, it'll be a super entertaining fight. Banger matchup. Two guys, and the winner of these fights, right? The winner of Diego Ferreira versus that guy versus Matt Frevola, the winner of that fight, I say, they get a fight in the rankings, or you just push them to the rankings right now. So yeah, this is definitely, I'll just call it a rankings eliminator match. Winner of it gets a ranked fight or gets pushed to the rankings, and it would be a banger fight between Diego Ferreira and Matt Frevola if Diego Ferreira wins. But moving down, you got Elvis Brenner versus the Caveman. Now I actually do know this guy's name. I've heard it a lot, the Caveman. But and if you guys don't know, this guy's the Caveman. That's Elvis Brenner. Elvis Brenner's basically like a fucking mini Charles Oliveira. This Caveman dude, he has like some name Matabak. I know what his name is. If you say it, I would know it, but I can't fucking say it. So you got Elvis Brenner versus the Caveman. The Caveman has a lot of hype right now. He just finished his opponent in the UFC, came in short notice. Elvis Brenner, who's just been doing upset after upset after upset. And you got Drew Dober, not in the rankings right now, coming off a loss to Moicano. I say you do him versus the winner of this fight. The winner of this fight will have a lot of hype around them. They'll deserve either a ranked fight or the fight right outside the rankings. And Drew Dober is just that. And then if fucking Elvis Brenner wins, Elvis Brenner versus Drew Dober is a crazy fight. That fight would be sick. That fight would be that fight would be fucking insane. But if the fucking Caveman wins, he has a lot of hype around him. He'll be 2-0 in the UFC. He's a good grappler, and it'll be a good test for him against Drew Dober. Drew Dober's kind of a gatekeeper to the rankings. Gatekeeper to making yourself a solid contender in that division. And if the fucking Caveman beats Elvis Brenner, pulls that off, then I think that Drew Dober's a good test to put him against. And then if Elvis Brenner wins, that's just a banger matchup you could make. But moving down, Jim Miller versus Michael Johnson. So you got two old guys, two legends that have been around for a while, but they still kind of have it, man. They lose when they're put up against someone who's a little too good, but they can still beat guys that are in the lower half of the division. So you test them against each other. Jim Miller just took a lot of damage. Michael Johnson is injured right now, so timeline-wise it makes sense. You test them against each other, two legends that haven't fought yet. Should be an entertaining fight, and yeah, you run this fight next. This could be maybe a feature fight or a co-main event for a fight night. And I think this fight would have a little bit of hype around it. You have two legends in the sport. I think this is a possible retirement fight for both guys also. So, yeah. Moving down, Jared Gordon versus Nasrat versus the winner of Terrence McKinney versus MPC. So, yeah. Jared Gordon, I think he beat Paddy Pimblett. Then he had a no contest with Bobby Green, where he's doing decent in that fight. Then he knocks someone out in the first round. Nasrat, he's right outside the rankings. He's coming off a first round knockout. Terrence McKinney, he was starting to become washed, man. He was starting to get knocked out a lot, and he's coming off some good wins against NPCs. So they're giving him another NPC to pad his record. So yeah, I think Terrence McKinney's gonna win probably, right? So most likely it's just gonna be Terrence McKinney versus the winner of Jared Gordon versus Nasrat, and that would be a super entertaining match. Nasrat and Jared Gordon both coming off of first round knockouts. I think so is Terrence McKinney. For any of these guys, if they fight each other apart from the NPC, it would be a super entertaining matchup. So yeah, run it next. Jared Gordon versus Nasrat winner versus Terrence McKinney versus NPC winner. Good fight. Alright, this is the last fight of the video. Tony Ferguson versus the worst UFC fighter I could find. So this dude, I'm pretty sure he's like 3-4. He only got in the UFC because he came in on short notice, right? So what I'm basically saying here is, listen, Tony Ferguson, he's coming off of bad losses. Let's just give him a fight against somebody who we know he can beat, so he can just beat them and retire. Give him a fight against someone he can beat. Let him get the win and retire, bro. Come on. Like, bro, fucking, he's on a 6-fight losing streak. You don't need to give him to fucking Elvis Brenner or someone crazy, man. Just give him to this guy. Pretty sure this guy's like 3-4. He's somehow made it to the UFC. And you run this fight next. You give Tony Ferguson an easy win. He can retire. He can be happy, And then if he wants to keep fighting, you just give him another fucking easy fight. Let's just do that with Tony Ferguson, man. Let's just give him the worst fighter you could possibly give him. Give him an easy fight. And yeah. But anyways, let me know what you guys think of the video. Like, comment, subscribe, all that. Peace out.